Namaste and welcome to another episode of Viewpoint. We've been seeing recently that there's a spate of attacks in quite a lot of Western nations, including Europe and the United States. We've seen on the Christmas Eve, there was a horrific terror attack in which a car rammed straight into a Christmas market on Christmas Eve in Magdeburg village. Similarly, we've seen a couple of attacks in Las Vegas where a cyber truck just exploded. There was an attack in New Orleans where a driver rammed into people and then shot. And most of these people were either, if not immediate immigrants, they were the second generation from immigrant parents. So what exactly is happening over here and what is the outcome of this? So to discuss with this, we have with us Mr. Suresh Kochatil, who is a political and research analyst. Namaste ji.
Namaskar.
So you've seen what's happened on Christmas Eve, you've seen what's happened on New Year's, and in fact after the Christmas Eve attack, you've seen markets in Germany were quite empty, and then people were kind of worried, what happens if we would go now. Similarly, when we've seen the cyber truck blow up and all fireworks all across, and when we've seen the New Orleans attack, we see that there's some kind of a anger, not just on the perpetrator of the crime, but perhaps an entire community, more specifically immigrants. So what do you think is happening over here, and what can we say from these attacks, and where do you think it's headed?
I think this was waiting to happen. Nothing new about it, especially Europe. US still can claim proudly that they have prevented major terrorist attacks since 9/11. Their Department of Homeland Security is pretty good, but Trump, of course, has been raving and ranting about immigrants coming from Mexico and Canada and promised to push everybody back once he is in office on 20th of January, 2025. But the point here is very simple: is why is Europe facing this pushback? Why is US facing this pushback? In case of the New Orleans attack, we saw in the US that it was a US-born citizen, but he was a Muslim. He was carrying an IS flag, Jabbar. He was carrying an IS flag and he served in the US Army. Right. That is even worse. So here is a person who served in the US Army, would have sworn allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, and does a terrorist attack, does a suicide bombing almost. Now, why did he do it? Look at his mental makeup. He must have seen and heard about the German attack. This is nothing new. If you look at the way Israelis were attacked, 10 years ago, it was the same kind of methodology. Somebody would take a truck or a car and drive into an Israeli security checkpoint or at a bus stand where people would gather.
Ram into them.
Ram into it and kill people. And they would be prepared to die for it. Okay, very clearly. So that's why I called it a suicide kind of bomb. It's not that they have filled a truck with bomb and typically like what happens in Afghanistan or Pakistan, all these places. But the point is not that. The point is very simple, is that in case of the immigrants, and this is happening in the UK also, the UK is facing a huge pushback now. The government, the Labour government, they have been very, very friendly, and they said, okay, we welcome everybody who comes in, puts them up in 5-star hotels, they're having a ball there. And suddenly, the people of those countries are asking, is it worth it to get these people here in the first place? One can understand in Australia or a Canada, because one, they need population to run that country. Their population is minimal.
Dipping fertility rates.
Yes, and not just fertility. They're a big country with limited places to live. And Australia also is a huge continent. So it's difficult for them to maintain without a certain amount of population. And the problem is very simple. In the US, what's happening is the US let its guard down when Biden administration came in. I think the Biden-Kamala Harris tenure in office has been a disaster for the US. Not just from a foreign policy perspective, but from a national security perspective. They let the guards down on the border. They allowed anybody and everybody to walk in, and that has now proved to be very, very costly. How can you stop a determined attack like this? You cannot. You cannot stop every car that comes into waving into a crowd. Even in case in Germany, we saw there were barricades. There were physical barricades which this vehicle just pushed apart. Now you have to go back to the early days of now preventing terrorism by having concrete barriers, by having pop-up security bollards, all this kind of stuff. But the question is, where do you stop? Or how can you stop this kind of attacks? Because they are very determined individuals. They have been brainwashed. Even in case of the New Orleans attack we are speaking about, when I was watching certain American channels, they were analyzing, when did this terrorist, I've called him a gentleman, but when did this terrorist actually get brainwashed into doing what he did? Knowing very well that he's going to get killed. He just didn't push the vehicle into the crowd. He also shot people after that. Whether we killed anybody is a different question. So the question we need to ask in India also is, when we talk of Bangladeshis coming into India and operating here from here, we saw yesterday somebody getting caught in Hyderabad airport, a Bangladeshi coming with a fake passport, issued in West Bengal. Now imagine the kind of security lapses that we are undergoing in India. This is one case where maybe thousands of such cases. Not that everybody becomes a terrorist. Maybe they're trying to flee this country and go elsewhere to settle down and take political asylum. But the question is very simple, that why is it that it is only one particular set of individuals who are doing this? Okay, maybe they are angry with the Israel and Palestine issue. They are angry with other things in the world. They are angry with what the US is doing to Houthis or whatever it is. There's only one particular religion. I don't take the name and say everybody is bad. No. But the fact is, usually they say terror has no religion. But here we are seeing cases after cases where there is only one religion coming up. The question is why, for example, we have seen right-wing attacks also, there's no doubt about that. But that is far and few in between. But here there's a pattern that is emerging. And that is the most worrying thing for Europe and for US.
Right. So, with all of these attacks happening, do you actually think people in the United States or other parts of the West, do you think they will look at it in the way that you mentioned, that there's one specific community which is having a higher percentage of attacks, or will they be like, go by the skin color? There's a certain skin color, these guys, we need them out, because we are even seeing, we just discussed a while ago about a great push against Indians as well. Any Indian, doesn't matter what their religion or anything is, even if they are born Americans, even if they are second or third generation Americans, just like get these guys out. So that kind of a thing is going on. So you think there's any what's happening in the minds in the West?
I think where the mistake is happening is, of course, in terms of profiling these people. A lot of intelligence is being slipped down because one, the FBI is at the weakest in US now. The CIA has been compromised. The Department of Justice is going after Trump and not anything else. Imagine these are guys who should be looking at the borders, and that's exactly where I feel that what Kash Patel says is that you're going to shut down the FBI and make it into a museum the next day, because the guys should be on the field and they're sitting in the offices. This is exactly the problem. You are supposed to kind of look at chats going on in the World Wide Web. You're supposed to look at various infiltrate groups. You're supposed to look at people who are talking about, doing killing and other things. These are things you're supposed to do. That's what an intelligence agency is supposed to do. Let me take an example. Since the Modi government came in, it's 10 years and 6 months now. There's been no single major terrorist attack in India except for if you leave out Jammu, Kashmir and Manipur. The reason being is that they say usually, it's said that a terrorist has to be lucky only once. Correct. The security agencies have to be lucky all the time. Correct. Now the problem is for a 26/11 to happen, okay, or for that matter a German bakery blast or a Mecca Masjid blast or a Gokul Chat blast or a Lumbini Park blast, for that matter the Coimbatore blast, all this happened, the Bengaluru bomb blast. But the problem is very simple, is that intelligence agencies have to keep the ears to the ground always. In India, be it RAW or MI or IB or anybody else. Same thing in the US, but the problem in the US is that they got politically divided. There was one set of people who were politically aligned to the Biden, Kamala Harris administration, and they were looking at immigrants as a source of their vote bank. Something similar happens in India, by the way. So what happened was that the border issue became a big issue during the election because of that. Because they saw these videos of hundreds and thousands of people walking into US and said,
Mexican border, yes.
Yeah, these are criminals. That's, as President Trump said, these are criminals who've been let out of the jails in Venezuela. They have cleaned up the jails and said, go freak out wherever you want to, but don't come back here because we'll put you back in the jail again. So they fled. So the criminal records precedes them. And that's exactly what happened. What's happening in Germany, what happened in the US. And it's going to repeat. It's not that this is going to be the last attack. It's going to repeat wherever they see a potential for a huge crowd. It can be a Times Square. It can be anywhere for that matter. How do you prevent it? How much of policemen will you put on this field? The question is, you need to stop it at the source. And the source is illegal immigration. UK is facing the same existential threat today because they allowed welcome, open arms, please come in. You saw the protests in the US colleges, US universities for saying support Hamas. Okay. And today what's happened? Now where are the same people today? And this is what is the problem, that this woke culture which is there is driving these people into these kind of activities. And we saw that during Delhi riots.
Right. So earlier, if you see in the Europe, Poland was the one nation which used to very boldly and proudly say that, we are not okay with illegal immigrants, come through the process. And we used to see a lot of people, in Europe itself, telling Poland that, nah, you need to be open, you need to open up for refugees. But now we are seeing that there's kind of a shift in terms of the political ideology from left again to right in Europe. And with Trump, that certainly happened in the US. So do you think with this shift, immigration policies across the world will again be changed, or do you think we can't really say about that?
Why do immigrants come to another country? Let's take Sudan, or let's take Somalia, let's take Haiti, all these countries. Let's take the Muslim countries from where a lot of immigrants come to US or Europe, Afghanistan, even Pakistan. Why don't these immigrants go to Saudi Arabia, or go to UAE, or go to Bahrain, or even go to Qatar? No, they don't go anywhere. They go to the US, or they go to Europe. They take that rickety ride across the seas, across the English Channel, get into UK somehow, wreck the boat. Half of them die, but somehow the other half make it. Because they know that for a change, that country will treat them well. Because they have a policy like that, which they are paying for it now. It was okay for immigration to a certain level when the country had less population. But today you are struggling to control your costs. You are giving health care, you are giving other benefits to people who should be working. You are paying people not to work. You are cutting down the heating kind of subsidies for the elderly in the UK, the original UK citizens. And you are giving 5-star accommodation to the guys who are coming across from China who don't even have a passport, because they claim everything is lost. That is an ideal situation to get in, because you don't even know what your name is. That's what they claim. And I think to an extent why Trump won the election, the 2024 election in the US, was this immigration issue. He took that as a number one thing and said, we got to stop this. And the Biden administration failed there. And I think what has happened in New Orleans is kind of a first warning to the US government that to tighten up what they were really good at. Post 9/11, they were good. Their homeland security, as I mentioned, was excellent. The intelligence was top class. But they let their guard down. As you mentioned, Poland and Hungary are two countries which didn't stand up to this, which really stood up to this nonsense. I said, nothing doing. We are not letting anybody come in. We adopt a similar policy in India, isn't it? We say Rohingyas are not welcome, even though they may get a UNHCR card. That's exactly what other countries are doing. We don't want people to come and make our country a base to do their terrorist activities. Let them go and do it elsewhere. We have no issues. And that's exactly what the US citizens are saying now. Enough is enough. We had this nonsense for all. But the problem is, in the pushback, everybody gets bracketed in the same thing, including Indians. That is the problem, because they all look alike.
Right. So do you think, as a final question, do you actually think that most of these attacks that you see are being perpetrated by illegal immigrants? They come in, they don't really respect the laws of the land, they do whatever they do. But do you think in the people's mind there's going to be an issue with differentiating between illegal immigrants and actual legal immigrants who come through the process, they've worked hard, they've studied over there, they've gotten jobs? You think there will be some differentiation between both of these, or you feel, nah, they're all going to be bracketed together and these guys are going to take a hit, the guys who are actually coming in a legal way?
US treated its black with contempt till a century ago, not even a century, or less than that. Okay, it took the people like Martin Luther King and others to fight back the system. So, same with the UK, isn't it? They were racist to start, they are still racist. They refuse to accept it. At the same time, look at India. We still welcome people with open arms. We welcome the Jews when they fled from the promised land. We welcome the Parsis when they fled from Persia. We welcomed the Muslims, when they fled from other countries. We were very open about it. But the problem was, we never discriminated anybody after they came in too. But we also facing the music now. And it's not from people who came illegally from across, it's some people within. And that's what happened in the US case today. That we saw somebody who was born in the US who did this attack. Now the question they would all ask is the mindset same? Even if you're born there or you are coming as an immigrant, is the mindset same? And that is going to be the most important, because every person will now be looked at with suspicion. He might be a neighbor, you might have known him a lifetime, but then you are looked at with suspicion because an incident like this happened. And that is the most dangerous thing when you do racial profiling and everybody gets bracketed. You are educated? No, that doesn't. Osama bin Laden was an engineer. So what has education got to do with it? That's going to be the question.
Right, fair enough. So thank you so much for your valuable inputs. And you heard today's discussion. What do you think with this entire immigration kind of an issue that's happening across the world? Comment below. We'll catch up again. Namaste and Jai Hind.